We are live. You're watching the Merged Marketing Podcast. You're listening to the Merged Marketing Podcast. This is episode 184, and we're talking about how to be in execution mode 60% of the time. Right there with me today is Chris Ward. Chris, welcome to the show.
I'm pumped to be here. I can't wait to get to it.
Yeah, Chris caught my attention because she reached out to me on LinkedIn and sent over a very personal video complimenting this podcast, as well as explaining how she would be a perfect fit for a good guest on this show. And she certainly is, especially diving into this specific topic. So I definitely appreciate Chris reaching out. And first and foremost, Chris, let's get a little bit of background on you and your journey to get into where you are today.
Yeah. So, Jason, like so many entrepreneurs, when I started my business, I was working insane hours. Like it was nuts. I was exhausted all the time, but I just thought that was what you did. And I was about 2 years into that journey, and I was told I was losing some of my charm. And my husband, who was my biggest fan, was just like, listen, you know what? Like, you can't keep stealing from sleep. He's saying, you're always getting up earlier and staying later and later. And so, you know what? When I realized, oh, my biggest fans are starting to be short with them, and it was just such a grind, I made some major changes. I literally went from working 16 hours a day down to 6. Now, that did not happen overnight. That's a whole story on its own. But luckily I did, because it was a few years after that my husband was diagnosed with colon cancer, and I was pulled away from the business for about 2 years. And when I returned after his passing, my existing clients had no idea of my absence. It was just not how we navigated his journey. We were very positive in nature, and the local business community didn't know. And so people started asking me more and more, like, how could you possibly manage that? And so they said, well, if you could do that, maybe you could help me get to my kids' soccer games and stop working these, evenings and weekends, ignoring my family. And so then I started to realize that the people I worked best with, Jason, were people that looked good on paper and that were in business a while, but they were working too many hours for where they were at this point in their journey. And so the book came to be so I could reach these people. We started the Winner's Circle, where my clients all tell me that they get 25 hours back a week within the first month of working with us. And I'm just passionate that your business should support your life instead of consuming it.
Why is it that you think people, I mean, it's a pretty obvious answer, but maybe in your opinion, why do people choose to work these longer hours when maybe they don't need to?
I don't think it's a choice. I think you believe, well, okay, my business is new. And once I get past this thing, and then once I get past this next thing, and I want you to really, everyone, if you hear yourself say that, ding, 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 that's an alarm bell. And you keep thinking, I'm doing right, I'm doing noble. And then we buy into, listen, I remember saying to my mother, who knew I'd have to learn to stop working so hard? That's always been the biggest compliment you could get. And so then you think you're doing right by, this is how you invest in your business, is sweat equity, and this is what you do, and everything out there says grind it out. But if you listen to those stories, if you listen to those gurus, or all these success tales, the moment they stopped grinding it out and pulled back and were strategic, that's when they started to scale. So that's the thing. We've been told these lies for a very long time, and you just think it's the only way.
What is that first step, though, to going from doing that grind to getting to a point of being strategic? There must be a step there. And I mean, it's almost like, for a lot of entrepreneurs out there, work is an addiction. You know what I mean? And so to break that addiction, there's withdrawal. So how do you get to that point of being strategic?
Yeah, I have my own luggage there. I didn't understand myself how much I did whenever life got difficult, buried myself in my work, right? And which seemed, again, like a healthy thing to do, because in theory, there's no hangover, although there is when you're tired. But I think fundamentally we focus on three things. We focus on time, team, and toolkits, right? So number one, people do not know how to use their calendar. They're running their business and their life off to-do lists. And to-do lists are static in nature. To-do lists are really percolating lists of emergencies, right? They don't measure time. They're not in chronological order. They just make you feel good when you check things off. You can't reassign them to somebody else, right? So that's a problem. And I would say when the calendar is really your time bank account. And so many people don't even put their own work on their calendar. They just put external forces like, oh, Jason, you have to meet with me. Fine. But then your work for the day isn't on your calendar. And really, that's like saying, people say, well, Chris, I do this every day. I don't need to remember it. Well, that's like you saying, Jason, Chris, my car payment comes out every month, so I don't count that. Well, the money's gone. So too is that time in your calendar. So the big mistake often is people stumble into their workday thinking they have 8 hours, but they may only have 5. And then those 5, they're running it off this crazy to-do list. So that's a big problem. So that's fundamentally where we start with people in the winner's circle. It doesn't take long to get that sorted out, but that's where 90% of people are stumbling there. And then the second thing is you do need to have, some help. You just cannot be a sufferpreneur and expect to scale and do all these things. And the world is your oyster now as far as outsourcing goes, and having phenomenal, highly talented help for $5-6 an hour. However, with that, too many people are falling prey to the corporate world and how we were all taught, which is a very parentified system. You bring somebody on, you check their work like a teacher to a student, a parent to a child. That's problematic. It creates more work for you. So what we have is we have it set up completely different, and we lean into the super toolkits so that these people can work independently and have autonomy. And frankly, at the end of the day, really manage you. And so that it does not take more time, it relieves you of time. So these are some things, and the super toolkits are what my clients say are like systems and processes on steroids. And again, we all hear that and we think, no, I started my business to be free. I don't want these crazy systems and processes that I've seen everywhere else, which are static in nature, mostly there to cover liability, not written by the end user. So there's these 3 pillars: team, time, and toolkits, that most businesses just try to go harder and faster. And what they're doing is keeping up, hopefully, with growth, but not scaling.
What's really refreshing about what you say, Chris, is that, for me, for example, I've tried various techniques on how to be more productive, work less hours, this and that. And, a lot of it derived from living in my calendar, blocking off certain sections of the day for certain tasks. But however, what happens here when you have it set up like that is when interruptions happen in the business, which happen all the time. It could be a call from a client, a call from a lead, whoever it is. And if it disrupts my day, it puts me in a very negative mood. It's almost like resentful to have to break up my day by having this call, which is not good.
Yeah.
So what's your workaround or with this sort of transition from going to this point of having these 3 things that are on your to-do list, or 10 things on your to-do list, to just being like, hey, scrap the to-do list?
Well, I wouldn't have a to-do list. So that's the first thing. And that's why you're already stressed, because you have a to-do list. You're already behind the 8 ball, and you're already feeling anxious because that's what they're meant to do. And you're already feeling you're in a time shortest consciousness position, and you feel like you're at a deficit. And so you're already in a negative place, whether you realize it or not. And you're like, okay, if everything goes perfectly, I can at least stay here. But one thing goes a different direction, and now, you got these emotions in play. So what happens is, when your calendar is set up effectively, when your win team is set up effectively, and we work with our clients in the winner's circle, we not only teach our clients how to manage and scale and do all these things, but we work with the people that we find and bring on board for them. And the client gets the final okay. But we have coaching calls with these team members. They have access to us through our Discord community. They have the learning center, and we're teaching them leadership skills, not how to be task managers, right? So when you have these things in play, Jason, you don't have what it sounds like to me is you're always at a simmer and could go to a boil at any moment. And you're not there when your calendar is set up, when you have a win team that can relieve you, because you have the bandwidth and the space for movement, right? So everything isn't like the thing that broke the camel's back. You're not under that kind of pressure. So it sounds like, and I say this with great affection, that there's a little bit of frailty to what you've got going on, and you're somewhat vulnerable, right?
So yeah, absolutely. Obviously, a lot of it derives from, sometimes, saying yes to one thing, you're saying no to something else all the time, right? What has helped though is being able to delegate a lot of tasks to a team, and having the faith to be able to delegate those tasks to a team, which is very difficult to overcome, especially for a micromanager. You must see that firsthand on the front lines.
I do. And if I could just pick a little bit, because I think words matter. We don't use the word delegate because the work has to still come through you. So I think it's a lateral move. So our systems, the super toolkits are all set up. So it's not about delegation. It doesn't come around me at all. Right. So, and that's where you have to then white knuckle it and try not to micromanage, because it is coming through you and it is extra work. And then you're seeing things here and there. So if it's set up again to give you relief and more space on your calendar, you're like just stretching out and you're feeling the clarity and you're feeling the focus and you're getting all excited and you really get to pay attention on what's the real work, not all the pre and post work.
Let's talk about the duration of time that you typically see, because I'm sure there are hiccups in the process of having that onboard. Because firsthand, I know certain tasks are to be done a certain way, and if they're not done that way, then I'm not going to be happy, and I spend a lot more time with the back and forth. Where a lot of times I can just be like, I can do this myself. What's your workaround with a situation like that?
Well, you doing it yourself, I don't even know where to start with that, because you'll be saying that till you're 95 years old, right? So that's not a good plan. What I would tell you again with the super toolkits, here's a quick example. So with the super toolkits, they're a breathing, evolving document, and we're always what we call queuing them, CUE, creating, using, and editing them. So if ever anything's missed, we just add it to the super toolkit and we can turn on a dime. And because everybody follows the super toolkit, I can come up with an idea about something today, and then it's implemented and everyone's following it. So it's implemented immediately. So what happens there is, here's a quick example. It was when we're coming out of the lockdowns, not this Christmas, the Christmas before. And somebody who was working with me a couple of years, she had applied to go to international college in Canada, and she was from the Philippines. And she'd applied for this like 2 years before that, but with all the craziness, lockdowns, blah, blah, blah. So she was given something like 8 days notice. She got accepted to college. She was now moving from the Philippines to Canada, right? Now, crazy. So, and this was like days before Christmas. So with my process, I did some interviews. I found Maura, and I also had, excuse me, some big speaking gigs coming up. I had no time for this kind of stuff. So Kazel worked with Maura, maybe just a couple hours, handed over the super toolkits, walked her through them. This is the thing. You bring on somebody and then now you're kind of teaching them jobs that you have to remember didn't do, or yeah, we do that, but not on Tuesdays and la, la, la. She handed the super toolkits over. I met with Maura January 5th and she was at 80% capacity, no mistakes. So we just have the super toolkits. It really doesn't have to be as hard as everyone's been taught traditionally in the corporate world. So these super toolkits that we have, built and finessed over the years through a lot of growth, discovery, and growing pains and all that we put into it. This is my jam. For most businesses, you build out these things on the side when you have moments, but this has been our baby, our growth, our everything that we do. And so they're quite effective. And it's not a matter of how do I deal with catching all the mistakes? It's taken care of by the super toolkits.
Okay, let's unpack it. Let's unpack this super toolkit, because I'm sure our audience is wondering, she keeps saying super toolkit. What is the super toolkit? Tell me what the hammer looks like. What does the screwdriver look like? What is this toolkit?
So what they are, and I mean, my gosh, I'd love to be able to, it's a little bit more show and tell, and I'm just not able to effectively communicate this in the short amount of time that we have. But what I will tell you is, what makes them different from systems and processes are they are tightly written. They're very effective. They're very directive. People often confuse things like training in with like systems and processes. And what happens is then you've got all this extra information that what you're doing is training the user to skip over info. Oh yeah, I know that. I don't need that. Oh, that's outdated because Steve used to do that, blah, blah, blah. So the super toolkits are broken down into what we call language action categories. And what happens is tight language, you'll say something like, okay, when I'm done this podcast, I'm going to send him a thank you video. There's the link to what the app that I use. It's all really tightly written so that I can go through and I don't have to interpret it or choose your own adventure. So it's really about saving brain power. Everyone talks about time management. It's really energy management, because you want to be as effective and useful at 3 o'clock in the afternoon as you are at 9 in the morning.
Yeah, that's the tricky one, right? It's having the willpower at 3 p.m., the same willpower that you have at 9 a.m., right?
But see, here's the thing that's really important, is that willpower wears down your battery. When you're relying on willpower, focus, discipline. This is what breaks my heart, because people come to me all the time and they'll say, oh, if I just had more discipline, if I had more willpower. And if these are not character flaws that you have, Jason, you're set up in a system that's not supporting you. And so then you're leading into things that you think are character flaws, but they're actually draining you. So it's really not about willpower. It's kind of like, something I think of all the time. It's so easy to compare it to fitness because everybody's wanted to lose 5 pounds at one point. Okay. So if in my house, in my fridge, I only had fruits and vegetables and everything is there for me and it's set up, I open it, it's like, oh, I feel like this, that's it. I don't need willpower because the system is there to support me. But then I need willpower if everybody else in the house is eating cookies and chips and doing all this stuff, and I'm trying to lose 5 pounds. I've put myself in a system that is not helpful or supportive. So you don't need willpower. You need a strategy and systems to support your success, because too many people run from starting a business and say, okay, I got one client, I got two. And then the fallout is, how do you keep up with that when that was never your zone of genius, right? You, whatever it is you do, your magic, having things to support the infrastructure in that business and the team building is a whole nother thing. And then people try to wedge that in the cracks in between when they get busy and then wonder why it doesn't work.
Interesting. It reminds me of the book Atomic Habits. When putting certain things in front of you is going to create either a good habit or a bad habit. And it sounds to me just having the right pieces in place, i.e. team behind you to give you those positive prompts, are going to help you to be more effective.
Yeah. And we all often come to from the corporate world is very parentified. And so what happens too is when we have in the winner circle, we have supports for the people that if you were in the winner circle, we would be finding somebody for you and you get the final okay. And we have this 12-point hiring process and we've got a 90% retention rate. But then when we bring them on board, we also help you with your super toolkits, because you can get great talent, but can you keep them? Because they don't want to work for someone with your hair on fire all the time, because at some point, like you said, you get stressed and things interrupt your calendar and then you get all anxious. Like they believe at some point you're going to turn on them, right? So adding more people to chaos doesn't help. And so we also then have monthly coaching for them, live coaching that I meet with them. We have the learning center with all these tutorials, and we have the Discord community. What we're teaching them is not how to be more and more efficient. We're teaching them leadership skills. We're teaching them all kinds of things that are not about task management, that are going to support you. And they're going to teach them how to even use the super toolkits more and more effectively. Like my team makes a lot of the super toolkits that we use. And that means that also when I'm taking a course and you're taking a course, Jason, right from the beginning, you'll see acceleration come from me quicker than you, because we have a process for improving processes. So what happens when I learn something, it gets into action much quicker.
Let's talk about execution mode. Okay. Because I'm very interested in this, because you said, you know the recipe for being in execution mode 60% of the time. Can you explain that?
Yeah. And that does come back to the super toolkit. So many of us are in constant admin mode. That's it. And you didn't start a business just to run a business. That's not your zone of genius. That's not what people are paying you for. So what we need to do is keep you in the lane of what people are paying you for, right? So there's, even if you have to do things like, let's say, I don't know, I have to do some TikTok videos on Monday. My team can research, here's competitors in your area talking about this subject. This is similar than you, Chris. This is different than you. Here's some ideas. Oh, here's the outline from ChatGPT. Here's some suggestions. Here's what we think you should do. So then all of a sudden I sit down to do it, and I might have maybe 15 minutes of prep where I would have had an hour and 15 minutes of prep. So then I almost call it being spoon fed. So there's all these things that you can do that you would think, oh, because I have to do the videos, then that's all on me. But our super toolkit says, oh, here's where we go to check out our competitors. We check out YouTube, we check out TikTok. Here's the things we're looking for. Are the videos ranked high? Are they things that Chris talks about? Does Chris disagree with these things? Can we do a video on that? So they have super toolkits. So then that's fed to me, saves me time, and improves the output.
You mentioned ChatGPT. How has ChatGPT had an impact on your business? And are you coaching your clients on ways to use ChatGPT? How has that had an impact on your business?
Well, like anything, what I would say is one of the terms I heard that I think is powerful is really ChatGPT is only good as when you become a prompt engineer. Okay. So I thought that was powerful. It's like anything. What I say to people all the time, though, is automation isn't everything. If we think back to having a factory and we say, oh, this machine is going to replace 20 people, and you put this in and we get widgets out the other end, great. We do need somebody to supervise that machine, because you can come back 2 weeks and go, oh, we were expecting 2,000 widgets. We got 2 because it broke, right? So automation isn't going to improve anything or save anything if you don't have things in play to be constantly improving it. So we do have super toolkits set up on how are we going to be using chat. I think they should have just called it chat. Why do we all have to say GPT every time? I can't do it, right? So, or ABC. Why could that have not been?
Chat AI.
Yeah, Chat AI. So I met with Maura, and she had built out this super toolkit on chat. And I was like, oh, and she thought of things that I never even thought of. Like, she asked chat how to give good prompts. I was like, oh my gosh. So she had these triggers that we had for now when we write a blog, we start off with this prompt and that prompt. So now the rest of us follow her super toolkit. And as we learn new things, we tweak it. So again, we're getting things into action that other people are still playing around with on chat, because you're constantly relearning, remembering, and forgetting things and starting over.
Tell us about your book, Win the Hour, Win the Day.
Yes. Well, what I'm told very nicely, obviously, often is that it's a quick read. And that what I always aim for in anything that I do is that you can read it and then implement things right away. I'm all about no fluff, big results. So I think it's insightful and just makes you see things from a different perspective, as far as, that whole idea of being noble, working so hard, just taking a look of, are you a successful person or are you a struggler? And that has nothing to do with income. So just be mindful of that.
Awesome. Chris, this has been great. If our audience has any questions for you, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Well, they can check me out on all the socials, but I do have something for your audience. It's a free gift, free GIFT from Chris, KRIS.com. And in there, we have something that we won't be keeping very long, but it's a free version of my audiobook. So make sure you check that out. And we have a fun quiz that will give you some instant and actionable results as well.
Did you record your own voice for the audiobook?
I did. Yes.
Nice. How was that process?
Well, again, what I found is sometimes when you go through it so often and you're editing it, you kind of like, one sentence bleeds into the next. So I had left it a bit and went back and read it. And a couple of times I was like, that's a really good point. I should write that down. I realized I wrote the book. So I found it very different to leave some space and then read it. I was like, oh, this sounded better than I thought. So I was happy with it.
Awesome. Cool. That's great, Chris. We end every episode with the same question. That question is this: if you could choose one person, dead or alive, to represent your brand, who would it be and why?
Oh, that is a tricky question. You know what? As a Canadian, I know this might be a funny answer, but what I think I've always been impressed with Barack Obama's ability to have a grace and a swagger, even in difficult conversations. And I think that it's very noteworthy about how he presents himself in all different formats. So I think I feel I could learn a lot from him, and he would not do my brand any disharm. That's for sure.
Good answer. I almost think you did a little bit of preparation for that one.
No, that was off the dinner. No, I did that. Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. Chris, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.